Jesus, the Christopher Columbus of the soul. That's what I came up with at 6:30 this morning. So let's see how it goes. I'm not sure. God's greatest gift to man is the power of thought, through which he can incorporate into his consciousness the mind of God. That's a quote from Charles Fillmore. And of course, since with my Monday night class, that's actually what we're talking about. Of course, I had to talk about that again today because that's really what's on my mind. The total body of knowledge is said to have doubled between 1775 and 1990. I'm sorry, not even 1900s. Okay, that's still quite a big number of years. It doubled again between 1900 and 1950. It doubled again between 1950 and 1958. So you see that amount of time of worldly knowledge being out there, its time span has gotten shorter and shorter. And now they're saying that that doubles every 5 years. However, it's really important to understand that the discoveries around the world in this body of knowledge is actually self-discovery. It's not that we are creating a body of knowledge and finding it. It's been here all the time. It's just that our consciousness is more open to it, and so it can actually seep in and then come out into the world through different people, through scientists and philosophers and just every kind of person on the earth that invents something or discovers something or has a thought. It said that Eckhart Tolle actually started coming up with his stuff because he was lying on the bed like this, completely giving up, and all of a sudden it came to him about being here now. So we are simply gaining insights that have actually already been there. And it just means that our eyes are just open more to possibilities and to things. Actually, the word man comes from the Sanskrit word which means to think. That's what the word man means, to think. Literally, to think. So we are thinking creatures. Now we know that animals have instinct, and I guess we might think it's a thinking. Sometimes I think my big Maine Coon cat is very thinking, very much thinking. Just appears to be really thinking about something. But actually it's just instinct. For us, our minds actually think. We have the possibility of knowing God and of expressing divine wisdom. So I say that Jesus was the Christopher Columbus of the soul because he crossed the frontier of the mind and discovered the world within himself. Knowing that man has a responsibility of keeping his mind stayed on God. So our mind is actually the bridge between ourselves and the infinite presence, which is not out there, but is within. So it's a journey within. Now we know that an important element in religion is not just the feeling and the fervency about religion, but it's also our thoughts and our attitudes are also connected to that. So Jesus said, "Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and trodden down under foot of men." In the temple, they would throw salt on the floor if it was wet, to keep everybody from slipping. So that salt would definitely be useless. However, Jesus was a revolutionary at heart, and his was a spiritual revolution. He wanted us to change our thought, to change our minds. So when he speaks to his disciples and saying, "You are the salt of the earth," what he's saying is a pinch of salt. It just takes a little pinch of salt, actually, to make a pot of stew taste savory. A handful of his disciples who have changed their consciousness can change the consciousness of the world. Just a little bit. It doesn't take millions of people to do that. In Leviticus it says, "And ye shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall down before you by the sword. And 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall chase 10,000, and your enemies shall fall before you by the sword." Now that just sounds hateful. Swords and enemies and thousands of people dying, but well, it's not about that at all. That is just the fun part of looking at the Bible through metaphysical eyes, is that all of a sudden it pops out at you and you're like, oh, makes perfect sense now. So the enemies that we're talking about are your adverse attitudes and beliefs, and the sword is the word of truth. And a little bit of that salt, a little bit of having the right consciousness can change our adverse beliefs. It just takes work. And so sometimes it feels like it's a sword, but it's a sword of truth slashing through the beliefs that are not working for us. Jesus says that we are actually radiating centers of truth, and that our center of truth, our awareness of truth is dynamic. It can't be static. If it's static, then there's no room for growth. So we've been talking about how we need to have an open consciousness, fluid boundaries, not living inside of a box. If you live inside of a box, you can't change anything because you know where all the boundaries are. So being fluid, because the truth is dynamic. With all thy getting, get understanding. Okay, well, understanding is very important. So we can get truth, actually, and we can certainly get it in the written word, because there's books, there's courses that we can take, tons of notebooks where we're taking all of the notes. But what does that actually really mean? We can be overread and actually underdone. Because just because you cram it all in there doesn't mean you've actually recognized it, realized it, and taken it into yourself and then lived your life with it. So that's the important thing about, okay, you can read it and you can read about it 1,000 times, but until you do something with the truth that you found, that you're going, oh, let me try this, then it's just sitting there on the page and it just doesn't do anything for you. Chaucer said, if gold rust, what should iron do? Well, we know iron rusts, but if the gold is rusty. So what we're saying is that if you actually believe in the divinity of man and the omnipresence of God, and you do not act as if you believe it, well, then what hope is it for the rest of the world who doesn't even know it exists? So it's the acting on, it's the being the truth, being in the process of realizing this truth, which is the important part. Man has no existence outside of God, but is the activity of God expressing as man. So we have to become the seasoning, that little pinch of salt in the world, in our world where we live. Ye are the light of the world. We've heard that 1,000,000 trillion times. I love that. It's such a great phrase. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. This word house, according to George Lamsa, the biblical scholar, is actually a gigantic, big square building and holds 40 to 50 people. This is in the Semitic time, in the time of Jesus. There were a whole bunch of people living in this house, and different families lived in different parts of this really big building. And so people would put the light that would light the area that their family lived in on a big post, and it would light their area. Now, some people were too poor who lived there, and the butter, they couldn't afford the butter to put, just to actually use butter, not margarine, butter, in their lamps. And sometimes they couldn't afford the butter. Margarine, butter. They couldn't afford it. So they would be waiting for someone who had more to turn on their light. It would actually shed a light into their little corner of their little dark world and would help them. However, in a peaceful house, the family would light their lamps and they would see that a person who was poor, it would help them. In a selfish house, people would rather not burn their light and sit in the darkness themselves than let their light shine on others. Well, are you in a peaceful house or a selfish house? So when we get the truth, We can be the light that shines everywhere on everyone. Now, there's a couple of ways it can go. When you start feeling really good in your life, you're either, sometimes people hesitate actually to take a positive stand in the truth, even in a negative situation. And sometimes people talk about it so much, they're just overzealous and they make everybody mad and they're just yakking about it. And, it, just makes them like your parents, your friends, they're just like, get away. Okay, so you're either not taking a stand or you're talking about it too much. Well, the answer for both cases is simply to just let your life shine. Your life and your light. Let your light shine. Just be the example. Emerson said, what you are speaks so loudly that no one can hear what you say. Because anybody can yak about anything. But can you live the light? Can you be the light? So the emphasis here is on being rather than talking. Actually, either way, either even an overzealous way, or that you are, trying to kind of skirt around a negative situation and you're not really quite sure what to say because you don't know how they're going to take it. Really, hold to the truth and let the chips fall where they may. Speak your truth. Do not try to manipulate the situation. Just be the light and speak the truth, and let people be and do what they are going to be and do and react or respond to you. But your only job is to be the truth as far as you know it at that point and juncture in time in your life. Jesus said, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. Now, of course, when they're talking here, they're talking about the Jewish scriptures, is the law. And the law and the prophets. All Jesus wanted them to do was to understand the spiritual law. He didn't say this law is wrong, this doesn't work, this is not the law. He says you need to understand the spiritual laws in your own scriptures that they may be fulfilled. And he means now, not next week. He says now is the time. And that the truth that they actually had at that time actually could set men free from their bondage, but they didn't know how to understand it. And Jesus was the first person who talked about it like that. And he knew that the reason that the people actually were not demonstrating the law as far as they knew it was because, first of all, they didn't really understand it in the true spiritual underlying sense. But it wasn't. Because these laws, the promises were made actually by the prophets, but it wasn't that God was withholding from them, which many people, I'm sure, thought, was because they were not keeping in the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law is actually a seeming miracle-working power in man. If we know the truth about ourselves, this indwelling potential as our own divinity, then we can actually move those mountains. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom. That's from Matthew. Let's look at this word break. There are 40 definitions for the word break in the dictionary. We usually think of break as violate, to dissolve, to like you throw a vase down and you break it, it falls apart. However, hidden in all these 40 definitions of the word break is to penetrate or to make one's way through. So Jesus is talking about breaking the commandments down into understandable forms. Breaking through the denseness of it into the understanding of it. So before the law can be fulfilled, we have to break through the dogma, that dogmatic shell that is around each and encapsulates each law, and realize the spiritual unity and the spiritual principle underlying that law. And we have to know the inherent truth in each one. So we need to clarify, simplify, and make the law, let's say even the Ten Commandments, usable. Or what is the purpose? And this word heaven, heaven is a present potential rather than a future event or a future place. And Jesus was trying to tell them the potential is here. It is right now. Heaven is right here. You look at a little acorn, and how can you even imagine there's a gigantic oak tree inside there? Because that's the potential. And that's what we are. We may see this little tiny acorn of a person, of a consciousness, but there is a gigantic, wonderful spiritual presence in ourselves. The divine man is the depth potential in every single human being that looks like they're struggling on the outside right now. The divine potential is always there. Now, back to the verse. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these commandments, okay, the least of these commandments, okay, so break means, so whosoever therefore, too many, shall break, okay, break through and understand the least of these commandments and shall teach men, he shall be called at least in the kingdom. Not the least, but at least. Okay, so you're actually at the door of the kingdom. You've broken through the crusty outer of this so-called commandment, this law, and you have found yourself through and into the understanding of it. So it's a starting point of releasing your splendor. So at least you're in the kingdom. So you're at the doorway right now. And the second guy he talks about is that if, or it could be the same guy, what they're doing is they're breaking through the dogma into consciousness, and they're going, oh, wow, this really worked. And they work it in their lives. And they become the example. So they're not standing at the door now. They're actually living it and doing it because they have broken through. They have penetrated the actual meaning of the law or the commandment. And their life is diligently worked at, and they have these wonderful insights, and they actually can give some direction to their dreams. So it's sort of you're at the door, you've knocked, the door is open, you're going, or you move on through the door with passion and desire and being open and receptive, and your whole life changes. So you can stand at the door for a really long time, or you can move progressively through the door and into the bigger life. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. That's from Matthew also. Well, that just doesn't sound very nice until you break it down. This word righteousness means keeping the commandments in their packaged form. What's the right thing to do? Well, I go to church on Sundays. I carry a Bible under my arm. I go to Wednesday night Bible class. My kids all go to the Sunday school in the morning. I always do all of the spiritual observances that I'm supposed to do. Now, this kind of righteousness is not bad because it's good discipline. It means you're in the company of like-minded people, so you go to church, you carry your Bible, you send your kids to Bible school, whatever. But this discipline is like a trellis. Now, the reason for a trellis is to support, okay, so you have a trellis, and at the bottom there's this climbing rose bush, okay, so the purpose of the trellis is to support the rose bush, the growth of the rose bush, okay. If you just have a trellis and there's no rose bush, then the trellis is inconsequential. Why did you even put it there? The scribes and the Pharisees were really great trellis builders. Their trellises were well preserved and even bejeweled, and they were wonderful, but there were no roses. That's what Jesus was trying to say. Where's the spirit of the law? You're just supporting the discipline, but where is the love? Where's the joy of that spiritual growth? Well, there isn't any. So don't just build a trellis if you have no intention of building putting a rose bush there, because the discipline is just to support the love and the joy. And you can even break this down, this word righteousness, and call it right useness of spiritual law. The right use of spiritual law, right useness. I always love it when they come up with these wonderful ways of looking at words. So the trellis is designed for the disciplined effort really to keep the mind stayed on God. Because those things do. You come to church around like-minded people, your kids learn about it. It all supports that life that you decide that you want to live. But if you're not really moving forward, then what is the point? Even just saying affirmations of truth over and over again can even become an object for you. So sometimes we have to break down those trellises actually, and we have to throw them away, and we have to start again. Sometimes people, they go to a church for a really long time, and they decide this is not working for me, and they may even stop, and they may start reading and spending a lot of time alone and thinking and just being open. And then sometimes they're led to, let's say, another group, a community of people, and sometimes they're not. But the point is sometimes you got to break down those outer disciplines that you think are right, those things that, keep those commandments and those laws in that little packaged form, and sometimes you just got to throw away the package. You just got to do it. Because if they're not supporting your spiritual growth, then you have to get rid of them. And Matthew, I always call it Matt, it says, "You have heard that it was said of them of old time, thou shalt not kill. And whoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be in danger of the judgment." Well, it used to say everyone who is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Now I can just see the little monk there, his fingers are all black from the ink, and he's got his little candle here, and he's got his big book, and he's writing in Latin, he's trying, or Greek or whatever, and he's writing it all out. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense, because sometimes it's okay to be angry. So he decides to throw the words in without cause. Whosoever is angry with his brother without cause is going to be judged, is going to be in trouble. And I'll get back to that in just a second. Jesus has upgraded the social and moral application of thou shalt not kill, which is one of the commandments, right? And he's putting it in a mental and spiritual frame of experience. Because people will always say, well, I keep the commandments, I haven't killed anybody lately. Yes, but have you thought about it? Have you thought about doing harm to another person? Even in passing, even in jest. I know I've heard Eric Butterworth say, the universe can't take a joke. So if you put it out there, and you put it out there enough times, it's going to happen. Even in jest. That may be a little too serious for you guys, but it's like if you just look at it way down in that space, you could go, well, that could be true, because it adds on to a little piece, a little piece, a little piece, and now it becomes a sticky spot. I've talked about that before. It becomes a sticky spot in your brain, and now because you've thought about it so many times. So what Jesus is saying is that every thought we have that's negative is a killing thought. So we are not keeping that commandment if we are thinking the thoughts that are killing our consciousness. So murder or stealing or even adultery are acts of thought. If you covet somebody else's relationship, if you covet somebody else's possessions, you've already done the deed. So that's why we guard our thoughts. We don't need to go there. They're all killing thoughts because they kill our consciousness. Your thought is your life. Because our thought is what connects us to God. You could keep every commandment and every law in the Bible. and still experience the judgment of that hellfire in your experience. You have to take those commandments, those laws, what you think is right, and you have to break them down into workable rules for living and thinking. So when Jesus talks about the judgment over here in this, when he's talking about being in the judgment and the hellfire, he really is talking about a state of consciousness. You know people in hell right now. You know who they are. Everybody knows at least one person who's in hell right now. Because hell is not a place, it is a state of consciousness no matter where you are. It is not a place you go after you die. And actually, we never die anyway. We are eternal. Man is not punished for his sins, but by his sins. There's another two little tiny words there. When I heard that, I was just like, woohoo! I was doing the Snoopy dance. I was so excited. Oh my goodness. It was like, what? That makes so much sense. Because if you think you're being punished for your sins, you think there's a God up there doing it to you. To me, that was a very powerful statement because that took God out of the realm of somebody who's a punisher. Because he, this guy up in heaven with a big beard sitting on a throne with a big book and a pen in his hand, writing down my sins, of course, just did away with all that. Just got rid of that whole entire image for me, and it was just so wonderful. So the punishment is the hell of the inner conflict that leads to the physical stress and the illnesses that we have in our lives. That's the punishment. It's that hell we live in when we're upset, and then we let it fester, and then it turns into stress and pain. So actually, we do a lot of killing. That doesn't come under the actual traditional looking at this word, thou shalt not kill. So every destructive thought that we have is a killing thought. When we let ourselves go on emotional binges of anger, hatred, bitterness, jealousy, fear, there's no dodging it. You can't have your pet peeves and have peace of mind also. You have to make a choice. It's all about choice. So, you may have a perfect right to be angry at somebody like this, whosoever is angry with his brother without cause is going to have to get the judgment and the hellfire. Well, if you think somebody has a perfect right to be angry about some injury that they've done to you, then you also have the right to have a nervous stomach disorder and ulcers. Because that's what you're going to get. It will inevitably follow if you allow yourself to wallow in that. So your responsibility to yourself, as well as to divine law, is to keep yourself inwardly poised, to keep your thoughts positive and loving, in spite of everything that's going on around you. So if we remember who we are, and we keep that inward contact, I always say the way out is in. The way out of any situation is always in. It's always in. And if we don't let ourselves be drawn to the level of consciousness where someone else is, but we meet them at our own level is, well, where's your thought? What are you thinking? There's a Chinese proverb that says this: a man may not be able to permit birds from flying over his head, but he has a right to determine whether they shall make nests in his hair. Birds are always going to be flying around. And they may even go like this to you and go that way. It's worse when bats do it because that's kind of scary. We're talking about birds here. So a bird may come and just sort of, miss your head and fly off. You're the only one that can let it sit in your head and twirl around your hair and make a nice little pretty nest in there. So the person who may be outwardly annoying you, okay, he may be outwardly annoying to everybody. But if he annoys you, then it is your thought about him that is the problem. It's not that this person's annoying. It's that you've taken it on. You've let him make a nest in your hair. If you change your thought about that person, then the whole experience with that person changes. So don't allow those birds to make nests in your hair. Okay, I just looked at the time and, okay. Oh, you know me, I get long-winded. I'm so sorry. Let me just move this right along. I just get so excited. I just looked at Jan standing up in the back and I thought, oh, she's standing. Okay, so enough about birds in the nest in the hair. Okay. Agree with thine adversary quickly. Well, now that just doesn't sound like very good advice, does it? There's another one of those things in the Bible. Just go, what was Matthew thinking? Or whatever the guy who took the name Matthew who decided to write this in here. What was he thinking when he wrote this? What was Jesus thinking when he agree with thine adversary quickly, whilst thou art in the way with him, in the way with him, which means right here, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou to be cast in prison. That sounds really bad. This word adversary, well, now let's say two words. Agree with your adversary. So agree means to settle with. And their adversary in this phrasing means your adverse thoughts or reactions to people or situations. So this adversary delivering you to the judge, the officer, and ultimately to the prison is a really great illustration, because when a negative thought or fear comes into your mind, if you don't settle with it right away, then you are going to go to the prison of your sickness and to the prison of your inharmony. In every experience we face, there is always a time when the problem exists as just a tiny little seed. So you're standing in front of somebody at work and they say something to you. Now, in that exact moment, that seed is being formed. Is it going to be a seed that says, I'm just can't even repeat it out loud? Or are you going to choose to go the other direction, which is to love that person? First, get centered, know that you are the love of God, that I am a child of God, and just let it go. So Jesus is saying, don't procrastinate. Whenever you begin to experience these adverse feelings within yourself about somebody else, deal with it right away. Don't let it make a nest in your hair. He didn't really say nest in your hair, but you know what I mean. Because the fire will spread and ultimately imprison you in a further difficult situation. So agree quickly. Get your mind in a state of love and non-resistance. Don't take it personally. You could even say, I agree with God only. What does God know about me? He knows I'm wholeness, I'm abundance, I am kindness, I'm love, I'm patience, I'm harmony, I'm peace. Because God can't know negative things about me. Because then that wouldn't be God. I have to know those same things about me. So I can say, I agree with God only. So you get yourself into that neutral space as opposed to being in that adversarial space. You deal with it quickly and you let it go. Now, I know that's probably not so easy. Don't procrastinate. Don't give in to it. Don't let it build a nest. And let go. One of the most wonderful stories in the Bible, I think, is where Jesus is asleep in the boat, and the storm whips up, and they say, Master, don't you care about us? We're going to die. And Jesus just rose out of the boat, wiped his little eyes, because they'd been sleeping. He rebuked the wind and then said to the sea, Peace, be still. And it got all quiet. Now, did Jesus say, well, guys, listen, don't get too excited. There things are really not as bad as you think they are. We'll pull together something somehow. I don't know how, but we're going to fix this. He didn't say that. He did not let his mind wander into that dangerous territory of considering the storm a problem in the first place. He was in perfect agreement with God. He simply spoke the strong and powerful word, and the storm subsided. So that's what we have to do. When some little ache or pain comes up, or some problem happens with, you conceive of something as a problem with a person, just don't let it happen. Take that seed of possibility and make it into a positive. So, and the reason Jesus could do all of this is because he was on the pre-prayerment plan. Jesus was on the pre-prayerment plan. I can almost not even say that. That's that spiritual bank account. That's that meditation you do when you have time to do it quietly in any time of the day. That is when we fill it up so that when those weird things happen, we don't leap out at somebody right away because we're already prayed up. We're on the pre-prayerment plan. And that is the wonderful power of taking that time to meditate. Because when those things happen, we're already filled up with the good stuff. And that other stuff that comes at us, it just doesn't seem to bother us as much. I'm telling you, that really works. So agree with thine adversary quickly. Things may happen around you, things may happen to you, but the most important thing is what happens in you. I don't even know who said that the first time, but I just think it's just a really great thing. So, I agree with God only. That's what we're going to work on. Let's say that together. I agree with God only. So whenever something weird just comes and just seems to smack you up the side of the face, just say, I agree with God only. And that thing just goes away. It's not being Pollyanna. It's knowing the truth about yourself. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I could go on for hours, actually, but I'm not going to make you sit there because I want to go hiking, like in 25 minutes. So thank you very much, and Omnitones.